So you all know how much I love cowboys and babies and dogs, so that's what caught my eye with this cover. The cover alone was just outstanding. There's two books in one book, so it took me a little longer to do a book review with you all. The first book is called The Texas Cowboys Baby Rescue, and it's by Cathy, Gillen, Thacker. And we're going to do this separately. So this is going to be this first review, and then we're going to do the second review with The Bull Rider's Twin Trouble by Allie Olson. So let me just give you what they say the first one's about, and then I'll give you a little brief overview, any passages that may have stuck out, and the rating. Finding an abandoned baby and a puppy brings a nurse Bridget Monroe one step closer to her dream of adoption. But Colin Reed McCabe, a.k.a. the gruffiest, the sexiest rancher in Laramie, Texas, stands in her way. Colin is determined to find Robbie's birth parents, even if it means Bridget losing her chance to raise a child. But could family mean the three of them, not just for now, but forever? So, as you all know, I am a hopeless romantic, and it was a very detailed review, as usual. I've got my special occasion glasses on. I never thought that I would be using my special occasion glasses for moments like this, but, you know, every once in a while, I guess it's a special occasion to do a book review. Bridget Monroe's day was literally upset when a puppy galloped out in the front of the pre-dawn shadows. It dashed in the front of her SUV. She barely missed hitting him, but the mixed breed dog, Beagle Retriever, was basically on a quote-unquote mission. The dog leads her to a baby in a basket and note attached. 11 hours later, a rugged Texas rancher who was avoiding all of Bridget's calls and messages faces Bridget at the hospital. He was 5 years ahead of her in school, a successful, hard-working man, Colin McCabe. Wondering if it was some kind of April Fool's joke to which Colin's views a little boy, an infant in a bed, tagged Robbie Reed McCabe. Colin's head filled with unanswered questions as he spoke out loud with a question mark at that end of that name. Bridget was feeling as if he took her as a fool. Bridget explains the reason for a question mark, was unsure of the baby's identity. Colin wanted to know what he had to do with the baby in question, other than the obvious, meaning they share the same middle and last name. Bridget reached into her scrubs, because she's a nurse. This was left beside the fire station along with the child. The infant was in a cardboard box, and a puppy who upended his tie-out chain led her to the baby. Colin had a scowl, and he opened the envelope, pulled out a typewritten paper, read out loud, "Colin, I know you never planned to have a family or get married, and I understand that, maybe more than you could ever know, but please be the daddy that little Robbie deserves and take care of his puppy Riot too." On page 51, an undeniable chemistry begins to happen between Colin and Bridget, and Bridget informs Colin, "My life is complicated enough as it is." Colin informs Bridget that life will always be, but you have to enjoy yourself. Page 147, Rachel is a stepmom to Colin, and Bridget discusses biological versus being presented with a child. And we're going to go to that discussion because it's such a good discussion. This first book spoke volumes to me. I don't know if it's because I'm so drawn into wanting to adopt, but I was like going, you know, there is always that discussion of, is there any difference in carrying a baby inside you and giving birth as opposed to simply being presented with a child one day? Rachel, the stepmom to Colin, says none, she said gently. If anything, sometimes I think I love Colin more because he's of the shape he was when he came to us at 16. He's still getting over his turmoil of his early years. Her gaze narrowed. How's he doing with all this? It was a lot, both women knew. To be publicly assumed guilty of something you knew you hadn't done. Bridget shrugged. She was close to Colin and getting closer every day, but there was a lot of separate between them. A lot he'd yet to reveal. But what she did No, is she liked, or maybe more to the point, loved? He's mystified, frustrated, a bit overwhelmed. More than anything, he wants to know the truth, not just for himself, but for Robbie. Rachel sipped her teeth. Rachel sipped her tea because he's true his parentage will be an issue for in the future for Robbie, like it was with him. Yes, and though Bridget had told herself repeatedly it didn't matter as long as Robbie had a family who loved him, she worried about the ramifications of his never finding out where he came from or why he had been abandoned. That would be a lot to carry, and she didn't want Robbie to suffer the way Colin had. "And what about you?" Rachel asked gently. "Do you want him to find this woman or not?" She's meaning the birth mom. Bridget bit her lip. "I'm not sure. Depends on when you ask me. Sometimes I do, so I won't have this uncertainty hanging over us, and sometimes I don't, because it could turn out that Robbie has blood family who wants him, and in court biological trumps all. Unless there's a concrete reason for them not to," she amended, "like addiction or abuse, that would be a bad situation. I'm guessing Colin is worried about what the social services and courts will eventually do too. Given how much he is bonded with the baby, Robbie, and Riot, Bridget saw no reason not to admit it. Yes, he is." She sighed and shook her head, and then, on top of it all that, having the potential buyers unexpectedly pull out of the auction. Rachel sat up straighter. "Wait, could you repeat that?" Briefly, Bridget explained what happened. "And do you know which customers?" Rachel asked, brow furrowing. "No, or how many?" "He said 5 this morning. There are still 15 bidding. At least that's what he told me when he left earlier. There was a virtual online auction for some of his cattle, and the parentage of Robbie was affecting the cattle auction. So it was kind of sad, and it's like a big thing for it to affect that. And the poor baby, he's so innocent, and just left at this fire station with a note, and there's really nothing that could be tying the baby to Colin other than the same middle name and last name. So they were in search of finding the biological parents, and Bridget wanted to adopt him, and it was just a long, drawn-out circle that it does get completed, but we're going to continue on. On page 148, Colin and Bridget are amazed at how much life has changed in a little over a week, but Colin says no arguing, it's been for the better. On page 167, Colin calls Bridget his woman. Oh, I love this part. This part is pretty much what made the book. Let me get you to that page. They're kind of arguing and kind of not, and it's romantic. Drawing a deep breath, she moved closer. "Why didn't you tell me about any of this?" Colin shrugged at her disappointment, once again shutting her out. "I didn't want you to worry about something that might not yield anything, as it initially didn't. You had enough to deal with between the mortgage," she was trying to get a mortgage on a house to get the okay for the baby, "and trying to get chosen to adopt." His eyes gleamed. "I was trying to protect you. It's what a man does for his woman." "His woman," Bridget gulped. "You're saying that you're my woman?" "Hell yes! What did you think? That this was casual for me? It's not, Bridget. It never has been." His eyes closed to a half-mast. "And it never will be." Slowly he lowered his head and cradled her face in his big, rough hands. "For me either," Bridget whispered back, her heart pounding in her chest. Just something about that right there was just like, wow. I can't explain it. It's just, wow. Okay. And of course she says she didn't think that he had a romantic bone in his body. And he's like, "Well, never thought I did either." And that was until she showed him otherwise. Just written wonderfully. Okay, on page 179, we're moving forward. Why am I reading page 179? Read my notes, Donna. It does not say. That's how well prepared Donna is. Okay. Oh, she's worried that she'll never have the family that she's always wanted. He brought her close for another hug. He breathed in her womanly scent. "You're going to get that family you want, sweetheart." She drew back, her lower lip quivering, no longer ultra-confident. Bridget, he'd clashed with it in the hospital nursery. "And how do you know?" she whispered. "Easy. He buried his face in her fragrant softness of her hair. Because I'm personally going to see to it, one way or another, she would have a baby, a puppy to love, a husband who cherished her, and a place for them all to call home. And when that happened, they both would know what true contentment was. It's written wonderfully. Page 213, Bridget is scared about what may happen to little Robbie and Riot. Colin is trying to provide her with hope that this is their destiny. Okay, and Bridget is trying to be the sensible one, which is sometimes hard to do. So let me get to page 213. We will get to page 213. Okay. Let's not romanticize this, Colin. If this path to family closes, another one will open up. I'll make sure it does, he promised, his expression suddenly one of concern. But sometimes in life you have to let things play out the way they're meant to, even though waiting was the hardest part. Oh, this man is just too much. Okay, on page 220, Colin asked Bridget to marry him, and Bridget said no. So we got to get there. His face was bland and polite mask. You don't have any doubts about taking on Robbie and Riot? No, of course not. Where was he going with this? He folded his arms in front of him, all too ready to judge her unfairly. But do you have doubts about hitching your wagon to mine? No, but I'm saying this all happened awfully fast for you, Colin. I've been the foster adopt list for the last 2 years. For you, the idea of parenthood and sharing your life with anyone is brand new. When the novelty wears off, the reality hits, and you have to decide whether or not to keep flipping ranches, expanding your horizons, or staying here waiting for the right land to open up. You may not be so happy. He looked at her incredulous. So it's all on me. Defiantly, she held her ground. Why are you twisting everything I say? He caught her by the shoulders. Because I think issues have nothing to do with your reluctance to marry me. Hurt and resentment underscored his low tone. Blinking back tears, she splayed her hands across his chest, holding him at bay. Then what does? He stared at her as if a stranger. Your notions of destiny or finding romance so big it will never fade. She inhaled deeply, not to mislead him. I admit that I want what 3 of my siblings have and my parents had, she said stiffly. What my twin and I lack, a relationship that's so strong and so right that it will last a lifetime. He gave her a slow, critical once-over. And you don't think we have that? I might, if you'd ever once said you love me, she thought miserably. Or you could love me. Or you were falling in love with me. But you haven't, so. That's her thoughts that she's having. She wrested herself from his arms as hot, stinging tears raced down her face. I know you desire me, Colin, she swallowed around the increasing ache in her throat. I know we work well together, and that we can have fun together, but we even want the same things for Riot and Robbie. But is that enough? Could it ever be? Anger flared in his navy blue eyes. Obviously not for you. He spun away from her. Where are you going? She cried, aware this could easily blow up into something neither of them wanted. Grimacing, he tossed the words over his shoulder. Out, to clear my head. And then page 224 to 225. This is the sisters talking, the twin identical sisters. You regret turning down Colin's marriage proposal? Regret didn't even begin to cover it. Not a second went by without wishing she could have followed her heart and said yes, instead of listening to her head. Miserably, she countered, he doesn't love me, Bess, not in the all-encompassing way that you need to love someone when you marry and intend to spend a lifetime with. Could have fooled me and everyone else who's seen you two together. Me too, for a while anyway, until at the end he showed what he really was thinking and feeling, or not feeling. Colin is a man of his word, Bess, and when this whole thing started, we made a deal. I would do everything I could to keep him, preserve his good name, and not bring shame on the McCabe family, by letting him help you with Robbie and Riot even though they weren't his. Right, and in turn, he promised to do everything within his power to help me get approved to foster adopt Robbie and Riot, suggesting we marry just a way to expedite that process and ensure the outcome. Bess scoffed. It had nothing to do with how much he has come to care for you and Robbie and Riot. We're friends. Bess lifted a brow. And lovers. Another pause. And we've successfully co-parented. Bess petted Riot. So what else do you need to be happy? In the long run, a lot more. You don't think it's destiny? The hell of it. The emotional side of her still did. The intellectual side of her did not. Bridget drew a deep breath. The crisis brought us together, Bess. Not knowing what was going to happen with Robbie and Riot or where they came from. Struggling to care for them together intensified all that. It gave us a false sense of intimacy, and I sentimentally interpreted as that way more than what it was. And now she was swallowed. She was unable to continue. Now what? Bess pressed. He was very clear when this whole situation arose that the only reason he was participating was out of honor and responsibility. He hadn't seen the situation as their destiny, or been looking to get married or have kids the way she had for some time now. That's heartbreaking. Bess arched a brow in Bridget's direction. Like the real family you've been the last few weeks, it had been a fairy tale, but the fairy tales did not last any more than real relationships forged in crises did. She couldn't bear to see the happiness deteriorate bit by bit as cold reality returned. I can't take advantage of his generosity, and that's what she would be doing. So she had to be noble now, as he had been. I see, so you'll break his heart instead. Bridget flushed. Silence fell. Bess stood square off with her. Have you told him how you feel? Yes. Bess grabbed her by her forearms. I mean really, sis, deep down. Bridget jerked her arms free. Unable to bear the scrutiny, she walked away. I told you. I don't want to back him in a corner. The way her ex had tried to pressure her into doing something she wasn't convinced she wanted. Never mind, she actually really was ready for. So what's the alternative? Bess threw her hands up in frustration. Live a lie? Stubbornness. Bridget tried to hold on to whatever she could. It's not like Colin and I are giving up everything, she argued. Isn't it? Now, this book, I'm going to give you questions to ponder on why you need to read it. Did Robbie's birth parents want him or were they ever found? Not only the baby Robbie, did they want Riot? Did Colin and Bridget end up getting back together? Did they get married? Did Colin and Bridget adopt Robbie and Riot? And to find out all the answers and experience the burning passion, wildfire chemistry, you must read this first book, which is the author, Cathy Gillen Thacker, and the Texas Cowboys Baby Rescue. What did I rate it? A 7. So that's pretty high on my list. Stay tuned. We're going to rate the next book. But again, the first book got a 7.